There is a peculiar kind of modern man who is enormously proud that nobody can depend on him. He belongs to no church, no tradition, no nation, no permanent moral order, no family expectation that he cannot diagnose as toxic, no promise that cannot be broken the moment it begins behaving like, a promise. He has escaped every primitive loyalty known to man. He is cosmopolitan, good for him, autonomous. He has a passport, 3 streaming subscriptions, and absolutely no idea who should bury him. But he's free. His ancestors belonged to a people. He belongs to Amazon Prime. His grandfather could repair a tractor, raise 5 children, bury a friend, fight a war, recite the Lord's Prayer, and remain married to the same woman until death. He's got a graduate degree, a ring light, and an anxiety attack whenever the restaurant gets his oat milk wrong. But do not pity him. Oh no, he has escaped the suffocating limitations of traditional life. Nobody tells him what a man is. Nobody tells him what a woman is. Nobody tells him what a marriage is. Nobody tells him what freedom is for. In fact, nobody can tell him much of anything. That would be violence, wouldn't it? So he stands alone in the universe, perfectly liberated, completely unformed, and waiting for some multinational corporation to tell him what his personality will be like this week. He is as free as a helium balloon after a child releases the string. No tether, no restraint. Up he goes, past the house, past the trees, past every single solitary landmark by which he might have found his way back home. He cannot steer, he cannot return. He is entirely at the mercy of whatever wind happens to be blowing today. But man, look at him go. Eventually, he collapses into a drainage ditch behind a Dollar General and becomes indistinguishable from the other trash back there. But for one magnificent afternoon, he was liberated. That is modern freedom, my friend. Free from roots, free from duty, free from nature, free from history, free from anybody who remembers what you promised last Tuesday, free from being needed, free from being trusted, free from being called daddy, free from anybody waiting for him to come home at night, free from anybody noticing when he doesn't. No home. No direction, no destination. Look at all that momentum. Welcome to the Midweek Refuel, where we seek out the ancient traditions, simply because modern wisdom spent 60 long, insufferable years turning men and women against each other and calling the wreckage liberation, and never once wondered whether an agenda designed to make the sexes hate each other might have come from somewhere, considerably south of heaven. Last time, Chesterton told us something magnificent about Christianity. It established rule and order, so that good things may run wild. Order is not there to suffocate life. Order makes abundant life even possible. And tonight, Chesterton takes that very principle and drives it straight into the human heart. He begins by saying, quote, "Mental and emotional liberty are not so simple as they look," unquote. That sentence grows more important every year for us. Because the governing dogma of the modern West is that freedom means the removal of all limitations, which in my opinion is the removal of all sanity. No restraint upon desire, no permanent definition of human nature, no moral boundary that cannot be renegotiated, no inherited loyalty that the sovereign self cannot cancel. No family obligation that cannot be renamed toxicity. And may God help the young people who have been persuaded to go no contact with their families, their history, and their roots. Yes, some families are genuinely abusive and dangerous. I understand this. Sometimes separation is necessary. But convincing regular people to cut off everyone who knew and loved them before, making the new movement their only source of identity and teaching them that every attempt to reach them is a manipulation. That, my dear friend, is not healing. That is cult 101. Isolate them, teach them a new vocabulary, rewrite their past, replace their family with the movement, and tell them that every objection proves why the objector had to be cut off. If the movement has given your loved one a new identity, an approved list of beliefs, and a moral command to cut off everybody who will not affirm the new self, then your loved one is displaying the classic patterns of cultic identity control. It may have no compound and no single charismatic leader involved, only corporate sponsorships, university departments, government forms, rainbow logos, and excellent institutional placement. It controls language, it rewrites personal history, it treats questions as violence, and it teaches its captives to interpret love as hatred whenever love refuses to lie for it. This is what cults do. They separate you from every competing voice until the people controlling you become the only people permitted to explain what is happening to you. How absolutely demonic, how perfectly engineered to destroy a human soul while congratulating itself for providing care. Call love control. Call concern abuse. Call isolation healing. Call indoctrination self-discovery. It is the ancient work of the destroyer wearing a therapist's cardigan and speaking in the soothing voice of human resources. A person without roots is much easier to replant in someone else's ideology. So love them without affirming the cult's claims. Keep the door of your home open. Tell the truth. Refuse its vocabulary and remain a living connection to the home and reality they were trained to abandon. The church must learn to do both. Bar the ideology from the sanctuary without barring its victims from the door. No surrender to the lie. No cruelty toward the lie too. The church must be both fortress and field hospital, strong enough to keep the enemy out, loving enough to bring the wounded in, and truthful enough to lead them home again. But we cannot lead captives home if we are too frightened to use the words that tell them where home is. Wokeism captured the vocabulary. It seized love, justice, compassion, violence, identity, woman, marriage, and freedom, emptied them of their Christian meaning, and filled them with revolutionary meaning, and demanded that everybody else speak the new language. And far too many churches complied. Shame upon every pastor who helped them do it. Shame on you. Christians must put the vocabulary back. Man and woman, mother and father, husband and wife, sin and repentance, truth and falsehood, creation and creator. Not because these words are cruel, but because captives cannot escape a prison they have been forbidden to name, and they know it. The church must go first and pay the price for restoring them. Some generations of Christians must decide that losing everything except the truth is better than keeping everything by surrendering it. Mormon missionaries had to knock on the front door and admit they were bringing another gospel to you. This new cult entered through the school. It entered through the corporation. It entered through the government form, the therapist office. It entered through the smartphone. Sometimes, God help us, it entered through the church. It has no single temple because the culture became its temple. No single priesthood because teachers, administrators, executives, activists, entertainers, medical professionals, pastors, and bureaucrats can all administer its sacraments. We must identify every single official who abuses a position of public trust to indoctrinate children, compel lies, punish dissent, or corrupt the church. Investigate them, document what they teach, expose what they enforce, follow the funding, name those responsible, then work tirelessly, publicly, lawfully, and relentlessly to see them removed from every position of influence they have abused. Christian, the time for sitting on the sidelines and hoping this all works out is over. It will not work itself out. The foundation is gone. Not while the missionaries of this cult are teaching your children and writing the language everybody else is ordered to speak. The people of God must get serious now. This is not persecution, it is accountability. The Mormon missionaries had to knock at the door. These missionaries were already inside teaching children a vocabulary their parents were too frightened to challenge. Church, it is time to be as proud of Christianity and as certain of its truth as the apostles of wokeness are of their lives. Defend the sanctuary from the cult. Recover the stolen vocabulary. Pay the price for speaking it. And become the place where its captives encounter truth without cruelty, mercy without lies, and identity without invention, and freedom without exile. Because wokeism's attack upon belonging is not an isolated campaign. It is part of the larger war against every boundary that limits the sovereign self. No inherited loyalty it cannot cancel. No family bond it cannot rename toxicity. No biological reality it cannot reduce to a matter of personal choice and government paperwork. The modern creed is very simple. Remove the boundary and you increase freedom. Chesterton says that is psychologically, morally, and spiritually false, untrue lie. Some boundaries do not merely restrict an experience. Some boundaries create the conditions that make the experience possible at all. This is easy to comprehend. A river without banks is not a freer river. It is a flood. Music without form is not freer music. It is your grandchildren discovering that every instrument in the house at the same time. This concept is so simple that we understand it everywhere we look until modern ideology tells us to ignore it and forget it. The musical scale does not imprison the musician. It gives him the means to make the music. The river banks do not imprison the river. They gather its power and give it somewhere to go. The walls do not imprison the home. They make the home possible. And moral boundaries do not imprison human beings. They give love, they give loyalty, they give desire, sacrifice, and freedom a shape in which they can become something beautiful. Marriage vows do not destroy romance. They give romance enough time to become something far deeper than chemistry and flattering photographs. Doctrine does not kill emotion. Doctrine tells emotion what is true, what is good, where it belongs, and where it may safely run. Chesterton introduces us to the aesthetic anarchist. That is the sophisticated man who wants to experience everything while belonging to nothing. He wants all cultures, but no country. All spirituality, but no creed. All romance, no vows. All community, no obligations. All fruit, no root. He wishes to remain detached from every particular loyalty so that he can become a universal man. He has risen above the small-minded love of home. And therefore Chesterton says he cannot fully understand the Odyssey, because the great heartbeat of the Odyssey is one man's longing to get home. And Christopher Nolan has just proved Chesterton's point. Homer spent nearly 3,000 years bringing Odysseus home. Nolan gets him there and makes him leave. Apparently, Christopher Nolan lived long enough to prove his own warning. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Shame on you, Chris. You have a good brain. You knew better. At least I feel like you once did. Modern man cannot understand belonging, so he rewrites homecoming as another escape. He has risen above patriotism, therefore he cannot enter emotionally into Henry V, because he has never loved a people or place enough to understand sacrifice for it. He can analyze the literature. He can give you a 45-minute lecture explaining why the hero's desire to return home reveals his failure to destabilize inherited spatial privilege. But he cannot feel the story. He has information without participation. And that is one of the deepest insights in this entire passage. Some realities can only be understood from the inside. You may gather facts about fatherhood without ever knowing what it means to be a father. You may read the books, study the statistics, and analyze every parenting style, but there is knowledge available only to the man who has held a frightened child at 3 a.m, paid the bill he could not afford, swallowed his own exhaustion, and remained because he was dad. Which is why there are few things more insufferable than receiving child-rearing advice from a dink. And the same is true of marriage. You may diagram communication patterns, catalog attachment styles, and lecture everybody about healthy relationships without knowing what it means to keep loving after romance stops carrying the heavy furniture. Some things cannot be understood from the observation deck. They must be known from inside the loyalty. And Chesterton's point is that when modern man congratulates himself for escaping every loyalty, every duty, every boundary, and every belonging, he has not risen above human experience. He has locked himself outside of it. And the woke priest has performed the same miracle. He escaped every boundary of reality and locked himself out of sanity. You may examine worship as a sociological phenomenon without bowing before God, or study grief without knowing what it means to stand beside a coffin that has torn a hole through your entire existence. Detachment is not always wisdom. Sometimes detachment is simply the refusal to risk love. If you belong, you may be wounded. If you love a home, you may become homesick. If you love a church, its failures can break your heart. If you love a person, death may take that person from you. The easiest way to avoid disappointment is to expect nothing, promise nothing, defend nothing, and belong nowhere. That is the bargain modernity offers you. You will be wonderfully protected. You will also be mostly dead. Freedom from every loyalty is not freedom. It is emotional homelessness. And modern man keeps cutting every emotional root and wondering why his soul will not flower. Chesterton then gives us a distinction we desperately need: the difference between being free from something and being free of something. To be free from a city means that the city is not imprisoning you. I am free from Raleigh. I am even permitted to leave Raleigh, assuming the road construction ever reaches substantial completion. But to be free of a city means something far richer. It means the city has received you as one of its own. You know its streets, you understand its stories, you know its wounds, its customs, its heroes, and its private jokes. You can move within its life as a citizen. A tourist may be free from the city. A citizen may be free of the city. One freedom comes through escape. The other comes through belonging. One says, nothing holds me. The other says, this is mine, and I am part of it. The modern world understands the escaped prisoner. Christianity produces sons, citizens, saints, and heirs. The guitarist does not become free of the guitar by refusing lessons and striking whichever strings affirm him. He submits himself to the scales, to the timing, to the discipline, to the repetition, to the form. He practices until his fingers ache. Then, one day, those fingers can fly. The discipline did not destroy his freedom. The discipline created freedom the undisciplined man can never possess. The same is true morally. Escape family, and eventually you may lose the meaning of home. Escape patriotism, and lose the meaning of public sacrifice. Escape doctrine and lose the meaning of worship. Escape moral boundaries and lose the meaning of romance itself. Escape grief and lose the measure of love. And men, we have a particular responsibility here. The devil did not need men and women to stop desiring each other. He only needed them to desire each other without trusting each other. Men would learn to consume women, and women would learn to suspect men. Men would punish women for becoming What male attention rewarded. Women would punish decent men for what wicked men had done. Each sex would blame the other for the ruins, while the architects of the destruction sold pornography to one side and grievance to the other and antidepressants to all. That is not liberation. That is divide and conquer conducted beneath the marriage altar. We keep complaining that women have changed. Well, gentlemen, who trained them to expect that men would ask for nothing and take anything? Who watched the pornography? Who rewarded immodesty with attention while claiming to hunt modest wives? We did. Not every man, but enough men to build an economy around male weakness. And we will not repair it by whining that women ought to behave better, while we remain undisciplined, porn-fed, approval-starved little beggars, tapping heart buttons beneath photographs of women who would step over our bodies to reach better lighting. Men must draw the boundary again. Quit pornography. Quit simping, for crying out loud. Quit treating women as entertainment. Quit using one kind of woman on Saturday night while praying that God will send you another kind to marry. That is not discernment. That is hypocrisy. It's worse. It's hypocrisy with a dating app. If you want a chaste, faithful, modest, discerning woman, become a chaste, faithful, disciplined, discerning man. Pursue women who possess the character required for covenant. Treat every other woman with dignity, not as a backup plan, a temporary amusement, or practice for your eventual wife. Do not perform this for women. Prove it before God. Become the sort of man whose desires have been brought beneath the throne of Jesus Christ. Because women need to discover that there really are two kinds of men. Men whose appetites govern them, and men who govern their appetites. Men who consume women, and men who protect their dignity. Men who need female approval in order to stand upright, and men who stand upright because they already know whom they serve. Christian boundaries do not make such a man less passionate. They make his passion trustworthy. They do not make him less masculine. They make his masculinity safe enough to build a home around it. Escape every particular loyalty, and you will not become universally human. You will become a spectator, watching other people live lives. That should concern us politically as well as personally. A government that understands freedom only as liberation from every inherited boundary will eventually attack the institutions that teach people how to belong. Family must be weakened. Churches must be domesticated. Men and women must become interchangeable administrative categories. Children must be detached from the authority of their parents. The citizen must become an isolated consumer standing naked before the state. Because rooted people are difficult to manage. A man with God above him, a wife beside him, ancestors behind him, children before him, and neighbors around him is not an isolated individual waiting to be managed. He is rooted. He is entrusted with people to love, duties to fulfill, ground to defend, and a future to build. He belongs to realities that the government did not create, cannot redefine, and has no authority to erase. And shame upon any government that tries. You did not create man and woman, marriage, or the family. You did not give me my children, my name, or my soul, and you will not take from me what God himself has given to me. I will resist you. I will defy every lie you command me to speak. I will defend my family, my faith, my inheritance, and my children's future with every ounce of strength God gives to me. Because these things do not belong to the state, they belong to God. And under God, they have been entrusted to me. Such a man is not merely governed. Under God, he governs himself, leads his family, serves his neighbors, and builds what the children will inherit. And that is why a rooted man is so difficult to rule as a slave. He already knows who he is, whose he is, where he belongs, and what he must defend. But isolating from all of that, and he becomes marvelously governable. He will call dependence freedom so long as the paperwork uses compassionate language. He will surrender every inheritance that he has and then thank the bureaucracy for granting him an identity number. Chesterton saw the spiritual machinery before our rulers perfected the software. But Chesterton is not merely warning against rootlessness. He now shows us what Christianity positively accomplishes. Christianity does not respond to dangerous passions by tranquilizing them. It does not take St. Francis and St. Jerome into a church committee meeting and say, Francis, you're just far too joyful, man. Jerome, you appear upset. Could both of you lower your emotional temperature, avoid divisive language, and become two mildly concerned suburban men? No. St. Francis praises everything good with extravagant joy, and St. Jerome denounces everything evil with volcanic fury. Francis can shout louder than Walt Whitman. Jerome can paint the world blacker than Schopenhauer. Christianity does not make Francis less joyful. It does not make Jerome less fierce. It gives each passion its proper object and protects it from the lie waiting at its extreme. Francis may praise the sunlight, the stars, the birds, the flowers, the banners, the music, and the glorious army marching into battle, but he must not say the battle is unnecessary. Jerome, he may describe the blood, the mud, the corpses, the exhaustion, and the horror of the battlefield, but he must not say the battle is hopeless. Francis sees what is worth fighting for. Jerome sees what must be fought against. Christian optimism does not deny the war, and Christian pessimism does not deny the victory. That is not compromise. That is a world large enough to contain the whole truth. Modern ideologies cannot do this. They choose one truth, separate it from all other truths, inflate it until it becomes a giant lie, and then beat everybody to death with it. Compassion without truth becomes permission. Justice without mercy becomes vengeance. Liberty without moral order becomes slavery to appetite. Safety without courage becomes a prison. Modern politics repeatedly takes one virtue, removes it from the Christian architecture, and allows it to become a demon. Then, when the demon starts eating the children, the experts hold a conference titled Unexpected Outcomes in Virtue Implementation. Christianity is something far more magnificent. It keeps the virtues enormous and keeps them in their place. Wrath does not have to become weak. Wrath must acquire a rightful object and submit to a righteous king. Charity does not have to become sentimental. Charity loves the actual good of the person. It does not affirm whatever is destroying the person. And it does not hand him liquor money while pretending it has fed the family whose supper he drank. Meekness is strength so thoroughly surrendered to God that pride no longer controls where it is aimed. Humility means forgetting yourself long enough to obey God courageously. Christianity does not mix red and white until the whole moral universe becomes pink. It keeps red red. It keeps white white. The lion a lion, the lamb a lamb. It brings both beneath the rule of Jesus Christ. Chesterton calls this the Christian paradox of the parallel passions. Think about train tracks. The rails remain distinct and run beside one another. Because they maintain the proper distance and direction, something powerful can travel upon them. Move them too far apart or collapse them into one rail, and the train fails. Christian doctrine holds truths together without melting them into one another. God is holy. God is merciful. Humanity possesses terrible dignity, and humanity is corrupted terribly by sin. Christ is lion. Christ is lamb. The king reigns from a cross. The judge bears the judgment. Christian morality is dramatic because the gospel itself is very dramatic. This is why Chesterton says, quote, meekness grew more dramatic than madness, unquote. What an extraordinary sentence. Madness appears dramatic because it rejects restraint, destroys, and follows every impulse wherever it leads. But that eventually becomes predictable. Holiness is a lot more surprising. The madman screams at his executioner. The martyr forgives him. The coward kneels before the tyrant. The Christian stands before the tyrant and then kneels willingly before his God. The weak man is harmless because he lacks power. The meek man? He is peaceful because his power belongs to Christ. That is far more dramatic than madness. It introduces another literal kingdom into the ring. Chesterton calls historic Christianity a high and strange coup de théâtre of morality. A coup de théâtre, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is a startling theatrical masterstroke, the sudden dramatic turn that makes the audience gasp in surprise. Christianity's greatest theatrical masterstroke is that it brings enormous, apparently opposing virtues together without weakening either one of them. It does not preserve mercy by denying justice. It does not preserve love by calling sin good. It lets charity become radical, indignation terrible, meekness heroic, grief profound, and joy thunderous. Yet none of them may lie. That may be the deepest insight in this passage. The passions become free when they are no longer forced to lie. Francis does not have to deny evil in order to praise creation. Jerome does not have to deny hope in order to condemn evil. The Christian may weep at the tomb and still mock the grave. He may look directly at Babylon's furnace without pretending at his room temperature in there. He may call evil evil without believing evil gets the last word. It does not. Chesterton then points to the almost shocking moral actions of the saints. A Plantagenet king submitted himself to public scourging at the hands of monks. St. Catherine kissed the bloody head of a condemned criminal. Chesterton is not necessarily instructing us to copy every medieval gesture. Before anyone begins warming up the church scourge, settle down. His point is that Christian conviction becomes embodied. Their moral poetry was not confined to statements and slogans. Poetry could be acted as well as composed. Our ethical teachers write articles about prison reform. St. Catherine entered the place of execution. Our experts criticizes abuses of power. The medieval Christian confronted the tyrant in public. Modern morality often remains administrative, safe, tasteful, and professionally formatted. It is very courageous once it has passed through legal review. The saints' morality entered their hands, feet, reputations, dangers, and their bodies. They did not merely hold positions, they performed the truth. And then Chesterton delivers this astonishing line, quote, "They, being humble, could parade themselves, but we are too proud to be prominent," unquote. We imagine that public moral action must arise from vanity, virtue signaling. Chesterton says the reverse may be true. The saint can perform an enormous public act because he has stopped worrying about how he appears. He is willing to look foolish and stand alone. Modern man is often too proud to do that. He will quietly believe something but never say it where anyone important might hear him. He supports courage, in principle, provided it does not produce social discomfort. He has mistaken cowardice dressed in good table manners for humility. The saint forgets himself enough to become conspicuous. Modern man thinks about himself too constantly to become heroic. Sometimes we are silent not because we are humble, but because we are terrified of looking ridiculous. And a civilization ruled by lies depends upon that exact fear. It does not require everyone to believe the lie. It only requires enough people to be too embarrassed, too frightened, too employed, too credentialed, too polite, or too professionally managed to say the obvious and true thing out loud. That is how absurdities seize institutions. Not because everyone becomes insane all at one time, but because sane people learn to whisper. Fathers surrender their authority, and pastors calculate the consequences. You know what I'm talking about. Because officials hide behind sentences with no identifiable subject. Mistakes were made. Guidelines were violated. New understandings have emerged. Your children will now be instructed in the new understanding, and failure to celebrate them may result in further dialogue. Nobody did anything. It simply occurred, rather like mold, and everyone is commanded to be nice while the foundations are dismantled out from under of us. No more, I say. But Christian meekness is not niceness, not by any stretch of the imagination. Christian charity is not surrender. Christian humility is not pretending the truth is uncertain because liars have become powerful. The Christian can be gentle toward the frightened and fierce towards the wolf. He can forgive his enemy while stopping his enemies from reaching the children. He can love his nation without worshiping the nation. He can condemn all evil without hating the person enslaved by evil. He can recognize that a political movement contains human beings made in God's image while still opposing its lies, its policies, its coercions, and its consequences with every lawful means available. That is the freedom of the Christian heart. It is not blandness, it is ordered magnificence. And if this lesson helped put banks around something that has been flooding your soul, I ask you to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and share it with somebody who needs it. The modern world spends billions of dollars uprooting people from everything that gives life meaning and then charges them by the hour to explore why they feel detached. We are offering the diagnosis considerably cheaper. So now let us hear Chesterton say it in his own strange, brilliant, thunderous way. Here's tonight's reading from chapter 6 of Orthodoxy. Mental and emotional liberty are not so simple as they look. Really, they require almost as careful a balance of laws and conditions as do social and political liberty. The ordinary aesthetic anarchist who sets out to feel everything freely gets knotted at last in a paradox that prevents him feeling at all. He breaks away from home limits to follow poetry. But in ceasing to feel home limits, he has ceased to feel the Odyssey. He is free from national prejudices and outside patriotism, but being outside patriotism, he is outside Henry V. Such a literary man is simply outside all literature. He is more of a prisoner than any bigot. For if there is a wall between you and the world, it makes little difference whether you describe yourself as locked in or as locked out. What we want is not the universality that is outside all normal sentiments. We want the universality that is inside all normal sentiments. It is all the difference between being free from them as a man is free from a prison and being free of them as a man is free of a city. I am free from Windsor Castle. That is, I am not forcibly detained there, but I am by no means free of that building. How can man be approximately free of fine emotions, able to swing them in a clear space without breakage or wrong? This was the achievement of this Christian paradox of the parallel passions. Granted the primary dogma of the war between divine and diabolic, the revolt and ruin of the world, their optimism and pessimism, as pure poetry, could be loosened like cataracts. St. Francis, in praising all good, could be a more shouting optimist than Walt Whitman. St. Jerome, in denouncing all evil, could paint the world blacker than Schopenhauer. Both passions were free because both were kept in their place. The optimist could pour out all the praise he liked on the gay music of the march, the golden trumpets and the purple banners going into battle, but he must not call the fight needless. The pessimist might draw as darkly as he chose the sickening marches or the sanguine wounds, but he must not call the fight hopeless. It was with all the other moral problems, with pride, with protest, and with compassion. By defining its main doctrine, the church not only kept seemingly inconsistent things side by side, but what was more, allowed them to break out in a sort of artistic violence otherwise possible only to anarchists. Meekness grew more dramatic than madness. Historic Christianity rose into a high and strange coup de théâtre of morality, things that are to virtue what the crimes of Nero are to vice. The spirits of indignation and of charity took terrible and attractive forms, ranging from that monkish fierceness that scourged like a dog the first and greatest of the Plantagenets to the sublime pity of St. Catherine, who in the official shambles kissed the bloody head of the criminal. Poetry could be acted as well as composed. This heroic and monumental manner in ethics has entirely vanished with supernatural religion. They, being humble, could parade themselves, but we are too proud to be prominent. Our ethical teachers write reasonably for prison reform, but we are not likely to see Mr. Cadbury or any eminent philanthropist go into Reading jail and embrace the strangled corpse before it is cast into the quicklime. Our ethical teachers write mildly against the power of millionaires, but we are not likely to see Mr. Rockefeller or any modern tyrant publicly whipped in Westminster Abbey. That is not balance, as the modern world understands balance. It is not 50% courage mixed with 50% caution until we have produced 100% committee chairman. It is not a beige compromise. It is ordered extravagance. It is dangerous goodness under righteous command. Christianity does not shrink the soul until it fits safely inside the world. It brings the soul beneath Christ so that every human power may grow enormous without becoming monstrous. So do not seek freedom from everything. That freedom ends in exile. Seek the freedom of the kingdom. Belong to Christ so completely that your joy may run wild without becoming foolishness, that your grief may descend into the depths without becoming despair, that your indignation may burn without becoming hatred, that your mercy may overflow without denying justice, that your meekness may kneel before God while standing upright before kings. Love your home, love your family, love your church, love your people, receive your inheritance, keep your promises, tell the truth, defend the innocent, resist the lie, and do not allow a rootless age to shame you out of the loyalties that make you fully human. The man who belongs nowhere, well, he eventually understands nothing from the inside. But the man who belongs to Christ is free, because he belongs to a kingdom this world did not create and cannot conquer. The boundaries of Christ do not make the soul smaller. They make it safe enough to become enormous. Christ is King. Hail to my King.